In the 1960s, there were precious few very good blue-eyed soul groups, the best being the Righteous Brothers, the Rascals, the Soul Survivors, the Spencer Davis Group, to name a few. But there was another group that was up and coming that was looking to find their audience, and that was the Hourglass. And we're going to track their history and how they became the Allman Brothers Band here on Pop Goes the 60s.
Walk me out in the morning dew, but back home he'll always run to see Melissa. I say God rest his soul.
Though based in LA, the origins of the Hourglass started in Daytona, Florida, where two brothers, Duane and Gregg Allman, took an early interest in music, and they started hanging around as many blues artists as they could, learning their craft. And they eventually formed a group called the Escorts. The Escorts had a high enough profile to open for the Beach Boys, but by 1965 they had changed their name to the Allman Joys. Now up to this point, both brothers played guitar, though Duane started to outpace everybody on his instrument. And in 1965, Gregg picked up a Vox organ, which became his main instrument. As far as bands go in the Southeast, the Allman Joys had one of the best guitar players and one of the best vocalists. So by 1966, they had a pretty good following, and they got some time in a Nashville studio and recorded a number of tracks.
I'll keep my eyes on that northern boundary, deep in Kentucky where you'll never find me. But you see, it's much too late for me. I gotta get away from this way I feel. Don't you know it's getting me down?
Now those songs were all originals penned by Gregg Allman. The group had tired of doing a lot of cover songs, so they started to introduce more original material into their sets. And there was no album released during this time. Those tracks were cut or produced by J.D. Loudermilk. And they did release a single in September of 1966, but this was a cover of the song Spoonful.
It could be a spoonful of diamonds, it could be a spoonful of gold, but one little spoon of your precious love will satisfy my soul.
Spoonful became a regional hit, and the band went through some lineup changes, basically merging with another band called the 5 Minutes. Now, they were based out of Alabama, while Allman Joys were based in Florida, and they came together to form a band. The other members, other than the Allman Brothers, were Johnny Sandlin, guitarist Eddie Hinton, keyboardist Paul Hornsby, and they used names like the Almanac as one of their names during this time. Now, they found themselves in Missouri in the St. Louis area, and things weren't going that well for them, and they were on the verge of breaking up when they befriended the band, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. And because of their association with them, that group's manager, Bill McEwen, arranged for them to get a contract with Liberty Records. The contract they signed with Liberty had them moving out to Los Angeles, and it was time for them to change their name. They changed it to the Hourglass. Now, the members at this time, Duane Allman on guitars, Gregg Allman, organ, piano, guitar, vocals, Paul Hornsby, piano, organ, guitar, and vocal, Johnny Sandlin, drums and guitar, and Mayburn McKinney on bass. Recording began in June of 1967, and they released their first single.
Nothing but tears running down my face. Nothing but tears, how can they?
Now, all these band members were fine players, and with their instrumental chops, they started to make a name for themselves and started opening for groups like the Doors and the Buffalo Springfield. Meanwhile, in the studio, Liberty really saw them as more of a pop soul band, and they pushed Gregg Allman to be kind of the front man of the group and pushed him as a lead singer. You know, he had blonde good looks and everything, the Hollywood good looks, and I think that was kind of their idea. But the band didn't really feel that that was right for them. They were more blues-based, and they just had a different idea of who they were, and that didn't really jive with what Liberty saw.
All that night you came to me, fortune made you mine. Oh, say they feel so fine now, without love. Got so much love to give you. There's more than enough to last the whole life through.
This is the first album, Hourglass, self-titled, and this came out in October of 1967. Now, the songs I just played for you were very different than the long jams they were doing at the Whiskey A Go-Go. So the type of music they were playing, yeah, it was soulful, but it had that psychedelic style of production that was so prevalent at the time. And Dallas Smith was the producer, and he was really leading the charge, and he had a certain idea of how they should sound. It was very commercial sounding and very Motown-like, which is what Liberty wanted. The band, however, was branching out into some other songs, and these are some of the stronger tracks they did on this album.
Just like me, you cast off all the fear that bound
We really hear their talents on these tracks, and Cast Off My Fears was written by Jackson Browne, and the song In a Time we hear Duane rather easily mastering the psychedelic guitar style. Now, it's easier to hear the production style in these tracks that was all the rage in 1967. And the problem the band had was like, well, a lot of the songs that they had on the album, they weren't playing them live. They refused to play some of these songs live, and it was very different than what their live set was, which was much more a blues rock set. And unfortunately, this album didn't sell. I don't know if their audience, they had two different audiences or what have you, but this album did not sell. And what Liberty did is they, instead of keeping them on the road more, they kept them off the road, doing just select dates here and there, trying not to overexpose them. Now, I don't really understand that line of thinking at all. If that's true, why wouldn't you want more exposure for this band? They were not having a hit single, their album wasn't selling. What else is there but to play live? So I'm not sure if Liberty just wanted to keep them in the studio working there or what, but that was one of the things that they did around late 1967 when this album came out. Now, they were looking at doing another album in early 1968, and they had one member change, and Pete Carr joined on bass and vocals and replaced Mabron McKinney. So that time spent in the studio was used to do their next album called Power of Love. Now, Liberty, I think, realized that they may have made a mistake with this group, hand-tying them in the studio with Dallas Smith, the producer, and they gave them more free rein to do more of their own stuff on this and to sound more like themselves. Now, on the first album, the self-titled album, this album employed a few session musicians, not so on this album. The whole band plays on here, and it sounds far more unified. But the first single they released from this still sounded like the first album.
Talking about the power of love. Talking about the power of love.
So that single didn't chart, and like I said, it does sound quite a lot like the production of the first album, but really they started to branch out a little bit. Dallas Smith, the producer, I don't think he could help himself. He couldn't get out of his style of production that quickly or that drastically. But the Allman Brothers, their talent started to show through on these songs.
But why do I take it so hard? It's just the changing of the guard. There's no one so strange and may change and bring sweet delight. At the time I tried to save a love that was called me. Brought to life to still remain my destiny.
As Greg's songwriting was improving, so was Duane's guitar playing.
I have walked these darkened streets, listening to the pounding of my feet. They keep on going, going nowhere.
That was Duane on electric sitar with some very tasteful playing on the Beatles' cover of Norwegian Wood. Now this album did not sell either. It did not even chart. And unfortunately, Liberty's letting them have more time in the studio to do their thing didn't pay off this time either. Now, in spite of this, they were developing a very strong reputation. They started playing Northern California dates in San Francisco, playing the Avalon Ballroom, Fillmore Auditorium in San Francisco, and the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. And they also frequented their old haunts in St. Louis and in Daytona Beach, where they were very well known. By late 1968, the band was a bit disheartened. They weren't getting along with Liberty Records at all. So they wound up going to Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, in an attempt to find their sound in the studio, and recorded several demos. Now, when Liberty Records heard these demos, they were like, no way. This is not what they were thinking about. I mean, obviously this is too blues-based and wasn't very commercial at all. So the band ended up breaking up. And they started hanging out with some friends of theirs in a group called the 31st of February, featuring drummer Butch Trucks. Meanwhile, Paul Hornsby, Johnny Sandlin, and Pete Carr went back to Alabama and became session musicians in Muscle Shoals. Now, the 31st of February album came out in spring of 1968, thereabouts, and this is basically a folk rock psych album. It's actually pretty good. In addition to Butch Trucks, we have David Brown and Scott Boyer in the band.
Did you go east? Did you go west? I guess you'd go where the sun shines best.
So Duane and Gregg joined the members of 31st of February and basically formed a new band and recorded some demos in Miami, Florida.
Walk me out in the morning to my heart. Lord knows I can't change what it's so. I say God rest his soul. Well, I know you will. Well, I know you will. But I know that you won't stay.
Now, these demos were recorded in September of 1968, and this was more the direction they wanted to go. You can hear Gregg Allman's writing is starting to really improve, and these songs were released eventually on this album called Duane and Gregg Allman. This came out in 1972 after the Allman Brothers made it big. But those tracks are found on this record. So some of these songs were very good, like Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out and Melissa, were songs that were going to be done later as the Allman Brothers. But these songs were also rejected. So this did not make it to an album in their time, which was recorded in September of 1968. So at this point, Liberty, which was really owed another album, they were starting to threaten the group that they couldn't record with another label. They had to deliver an album to Liberty. So this is where things kind of broke up for the group. Gregg decided to go back to LA to make good on the agreement with Liberty and release what was going to be like a Gregg Allman solo album that was actually billed as Gregg Allman and the Hourglass. Now, meanwhile, these guys had been working at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, so that got them involved in a lot of studio recording. Duane Allman started to get more work, and one of the things he did was with Wilson Pickett. He suggested Wilson cover the Beatles' Hey Jude.
You begin to make it better.
That cover of Hey Jude made it to number 23 on the charts, and Duane Allman had started to get a reputation And Fame Studios bought out his contract for $10,000 so he could be a full-time session musician. News of his playing traveled so fast that it didn't take long for Atlantic Records to then buy him out again so they could use him full-time as a studio musician. And he started playing on the records of Aretha Franklin, Laura Nyro, Boz Scaggs, Delaney and Bonnie, and Herbie Mann. Meanwhile, Gregg Allman's mopping up of the last Hourglass album yielded a couple good tracks.
Sensations I cannot borrow. Your embraces don't ease my sorrow.
Now, those two songs are the best of a group of songs that were really lacking, and the label released a couple singles and nothing charted. It didn't really do well at all. So by this time, Duane is back. He was doing a lot of sessions, but he really wanted to form his own band, and he had an idea and a vision for his band that would have 2 lead guitarists and 2 drummers. So he started gathering musicians for this band. And all he needed was a top-class vocalist, and the only person he could really think of was his brother Greg. So he coaxed Greg back, and he went back to Florida to join the group, although he was a little bit intimidated by some of these players that he didn't know, and they were very fine players, but Greg did join the group. So with Greg back in the fold, we have a new band, and they named themselves the Allman Brothers Band. It consists of J-Mo Johansson on drums, Barry Oakley on bass, Dickie Betts on guitar, Butch Trucks on drums, Duane Allman guitar, and Gregg Allman on keyboards. Now, Atlantic had intended for the Allman Brothers Band to be kind of the new Led Zeppelin for a new label that they created called Capricorn. So they were basically, they were the house band for that label, I guess you could say. So Atlantic really had big plans for them, gave them their own label, and they started to record. Fans of the Allman Brothers are well aware of their heavy contribution to 70s rock music, basically inventing Southern rock. It took a couple albums for the Allman Brothers to really hit it big. Unfortunately, there was a motorcycle accident and Duane Allman was killed in 1971, and that did not halt the band, though. They went on for another several years with many hit albums and many hit songs, and were a staple in rock music, really, now to this day. So because of their popularity, the Allman Brothers' popularity, both Hourglass albums were packaged together as a double album and re-released in the 70s. And the 31st of February album has also been re-released. So all of this stuff can be got fairly easy. It's all available on CD. This is a new pressing on Vanguard. Really nice vinyl of the 31st of February, so you Butch Trucks fans will want to get that. And again, this is an easy one to get. This is the one I probably listen to the most. Basically, early Allman Brothers, it's what it sounds like, but with the innocence of the Hourglass, I guess you could say. They also released a compilation of Almond Joy's songs that were recorded in 1966. This is a really excellent compilation. It really shows the embryonic version of the Allman Brothers, and there's some originals on here that are quite good, actually. So one of the things I've always found interesting is how the Hourglass is very much overlooked, even though they've got this great pedigree and were in one of the biggest 70s, morphed into one of the biggest 70s groups of the decade in the Allman Brothers Band. Yet these songs by the Hourglass seem to be overlooked. And I think there's some songs in there that are very good. If you like 60s pop, 60s psych, and even 60s soul, it all kind of is mixed together on these first 2 Hourglass albums, and there's some very fine songs on there. And I had mentioned the demos here for this album. They're starting to do songs like Melissa and God Rest His Soul, In the Morning When I'm Real, some really excellent songs. Morning Dew is on here as well. So this album I think is really worth getting, and for all the pre-Allman Brothers stuff, I think all this stuff is I shouldn't say can't miss. I mean, I guess you got to like that kind of music. But if you're 60s fans of 60s pop and 60s progressive music, I would say the Hourglass is a band to certainly look into. That brings my story of the Hourglass to a close. Thank you so much for watching. To support this channel, one thing you can do, which is free, is hit that subscribe button and the notification button. I've heard some people that aren't getting notifications for the videos, make sure you click that little notification button. That'll help you understand when my new video is coming out. And I've got some other things below that if you want to donate in a bigger way, I've got some options for you there too. So we got more bands coming up here in 2025. So you're going to see them all here on Pop Goes the 60s.